The early 1990s were a time of bold experimentation in video game design. Role playing games were evolving rapidly. They were branching away from the static grind of menus and dice rolls towards the more immersive, emotionally resonant experiences we know today. And in 1993, one game emerged that pushed the boundaries of what an RPG could be. Secret of Mana wasn't just innovative, it was revolutionary. Developed by Square during a tumultuous era of hardware transitions and scrapped ambitions, it combined real time action, cooperative multiplayer, and a deep fantasy narrative into a package that felt like it was from the future. Its ring menus redefined combat flow, its soundtrack stirred the soul, and its story, tinged with melancholy and sacrifice, reminded players that saving the world often comes at a cost. Today, we're stepping into the world of Mana to explore the making of this beloved classic, the creative vision that shaped it, and the legacy it left behind. So draw your sword, summon your spirits, and join us for today's magical trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello, and welcome to the 258th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people who have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby video games a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we're diving into the lush, magical world of Secret of Mana, the 1993 action RPG that broke new ground for cooperative play, redefined how real-time combat could feel in an RPG, and built a fantasy universe that still inspires wonder today. Born from a canceled CD-ROM project and shaped by creative compromise, it's a story of vision, adaptation, and timeless design. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who'd probably insist on being the one to pull the mana sword from the stone. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, do you think you'd be a noble protector of the mana tree, or would you just use the whip to annoy everyone?
I don't think either. I think I would just take it hanging on my wall as a decoration.
The sword or the whip?
Uh, Both.
That's
Yeah.
no, that's factual. That's fair. I mean, yeah. I mean, you find cool things, you want to show them off.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
What about you?
put them on the wall and admire them. I have a personality flaw where I need to fix everything. So I would probably be the noble protector because of that fatal flaw. Honestly,
Fair enough.
I think that would drive me if you put me into just about any role playing story. That would be my fatal flaw. I have to fix things. So if you tell me something's broken, someone needs saving, any crap like that, just count me in. So,
Good to know, Dave.
yeah, well, that's me. Well, we have a whole story on the history of Secret of Mana. This is actually the second time we've talked about Secret of Mana in this podcast. Do you remember the first?
I feel like I do, but I can't remember what it was.
It was either our first and probably was our second episode. The last time we talked about Sacred of Mana, we were talking about it in the context of an episode where we were talking about video games as art. When we were, it was when we were a topical podcast and not a history one, and that was like the first 5 episodes roughly. So I think this was episode 2, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, quite.
But today we are a history podcast, so we're going to talk about its history. But before I get into its story, why don't you share with our listeners what else has happened during the current week in gaming history?
Well, kicking it off on August 6, 1986, Metroid launched for the Famicom Disk System in Japan, introducing players to a dark, atmospheric world unlike anything Nintendo had released before. Developed by Nintendo R&D 1 and produced by Gunpei Yokoi, the game featured intergalactic bounty hunter Samus Aran on a mission to stop the space pirates from weaponizing the mysterious Metroid creatures on planet Zebes. Blending side scrolling action with non linear exploration, Metroid encouraged players to backtrack, uncover secrets, and gradually expand their abilities in a way that felt revolutionary for its time. It also made history with its surprise ending, revealing that the armored protagonist was a woman, a twist that challenged gaming norms and left a lasting cultural impact. The game's open ended structure and upgrade based progression helped define the Metroidvania genre, influencing decades of design. We explored its legacy and development in episode 51, so check that out if you want to dig deeper into where it all began.
We did do it in episode 51. Yeah.
Indeed, quite coincidental that Metroid creatures in episode 51.
Yes.
Spooky
Oh,
alien.
Area 51. Got it. Good one.
Come on, Dave.
All right, you win. Moving on.
Next up, on August 9th, 1996, Harvest Moon was released for the Super Famicom in Japan, planting the seeds of what would become one of gaming's most beloved life sim franchises. Developed by Amicus and published by Pack-In Video, the game put players in charge of reviving a rundown farm, growing crops, raising animals, and building relationships with the nearby townsfolk, all while racing against the in-game clock and seasons. At a time when most games focused on action and combat, Harvest Moon stood out with its relaxing day-to-day rhythm and focus on hard work, planning, and personal growth. With its charming visuals and rewarding gameplay loop, it offered a peaceful, satisfying alternative that resonated with players around the world. Harvest Moon laid the groundwork for a genre and inspired countless games that followed. We dug into its roots back in episode 41, so give that one a listen to learn more about how this farming sim grew into a legacy.
41, 51. We did a lot of episodes back when.
Indeed. It's almost like we've done 257 episodes up till today.
That's a valid point.
Next up, on August 3rd, 2004, Doom 3 was released for Windows, rebooting the legendary first person shooter franchise with the darker, more cinematic approach. Developed by id Software and published by Activision, the game traded in the fast paced arcade style action of its predecessors for a slower, more horror focused experience, one that emphasized suspense, storytelling, and atmosphere. Powered by the then groundbreaking id Tech 4 engine, Doom 3 stunned players with its dynamic lighting, detailed environments, and haunting sound design. Set on a Martian research base overwhelmed by demonic forces, players stepped into the boots of a lone Marine trying to survive as the line between science and hell unraveled. It wasn't just a technical showcase, it was a reinvention that brought Doom into the modern era and left a lasting mark on both the horror and shooter genre.
I bragged about that game recently. What were we bragging about that game? E3. We were talking about the E3 episode. Doom 3 was legitimately like a technological leap uh, at the time, and it was awesome.
I mean, I don't know. I just, when I hear the story of that, it kind of reminds me of the Doom movie with Dwayne Johnson, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that wasn't as good as Doom 3.
Fair enough. Well, it just sounded very similar with the base, with the forces and whatnot. So, I don't know. Glad it was a good game, though. Next up, on August 3rd, 2013, BeamNG Drive made its debut as a tech demo, offering early adopters paid alpha access to one of the most ambitious vehicle simulation projects ever attempted. Developed by BeamNG GmbH, the game quickly gained attention for its groundbreaking soft body physics engine, which allowed for incredibly realistic car crashes and vehicle handling. Unlike most racing games, BeamNG Drive wasn't just about speed. It was about the feel, weight, and consequence of every collision. The project continued to evolve, and by May 29th, 2015, it arrived on Steam Early Access for Windows, where it steadily expanded with new vehicles, maps, and game modes. With a passionate modding community and a focus on realism, BeamNG Drive has become a sandbox favorite for gearheads, crash test enthusiasts, and physics nerds alike.
Yeah, physics nerds unite.
Is that true, Dave?
I'm a
I,
crash test enthusiast. That's where I am on that
I,
scale.
okay. Well, I haven't actually played BeamNG, so but it looks like fun. So
We've said that over and over and over.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
We should buy it at some point.
Well, we'll get around to it. It
Okay,
goes
deal.
on sales.
That does.
Last up for this week in gaming history, just a few days after BeamNG Drive, on August 7th, 2013, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons was released for Xbox 360, offering a heartfelt and cinematic experience that redefined how storytelling and gameplay could intertwine. Developed by Starbreeze Studios and directed by filmmaker Josef Fares, the game told the story of two brothers on a fantastical journey to save their ailing father. What made Brothers so unique was its control scheme. Each brother was controlled simultaneously with a different analog stick, requiring players to coordinate their movements in a way that mirrored their emotional bond. With its wordless storytelling, breathtaking environments, and powerful emotional beats, Brothers earned widespread acclaim and left a lasting impression on players. It's still remembered as a poignant example of how video games can deliver narrative impact through mechanics alone.
I'm almost positive that was the same episode because we played that to talk about video games as art.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I think that was the same episode as this, which makes sense because I was already kind of thinking about the whole concept of like the games had to be relevant to this week in gaming history. So to have Secret of Mana and Brothers on the same episode would kind of fit that theme that was already in my mind early on, you know.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right, so on to our topic today. If y'all recall, by the late 1980s, Square was hanging on by a thread. It was financially unstable, and its library had little to show of from its early efforts. And so, with all that in mind, the company decided to take one final shot at success. Literally. That project became Final Fantasy, a game so aptly named, as we've learned, because it was believed to be the studio's final chance before closing its doors for good. It was kind of a double meaning, a tongue in cheek for the team. It was going to be both the studio's final game, and if they failed, it would probably be the final game made by lots of the staff. So that's why it was their Final Fantasy. Except it wasn't, right? It did not signal the end. It became the beginning of something extraordinary. Final Fantasy turned out to be a massive hit, first in Japan and then globally, and that pulled Square back from the brink, so to speak, and launched them into a whole new era of RPG role playing dominance. Riding the wave of that success, Square kept the Final Fantasy series going, right? Final Fantasy 2 in 1988, Final Fantasy 3 in 1990, and these both expanded the scope and mechanics of the genre. But even as the Final Fantasy series flourished, the company had other ideas that they were trying to develop behind the scenes. One of which was an ambitious new project that was going to be called Seiken Densetsu, or Legend of the Sacred Sword. Now, Seiken Densetsu was trademarked in 1989, and it was initially pitched as a massive adventure for the Famicom Disk System. subtitled The Emergence of Excellence. That was what they were going to make it. Seiken Densetsu, The Emergence of Excalibur. Early promotional material that was put out in the world for the game promised that it would span what is a staggering amount, 5 floppy disks, which was a scale that was unheard of at the time. I mean, there are really, that's just unheard of. 5 floppy disks was unheard of at the time. We got there eventually. Not really for the Famicom disk system, but PCs got there. But for a Famicom disk system game, five disks is, that's ambitious, right?
That's probably a lot. I mean, granted, compared to nowadays, it's like, haha, that's funny.
I know
Like,
nowadays we have pictures that are bigger than 5 floppy disks alone.
exactly. But
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the time, that's pretty ambitious.
yeah, for sure.
Good luck finding all of them when you need to play the game, having it
True,
ready in time.
true statement. But that ambition quickly ran into reality, right? Upper management at Square, they balked at the technical demands and the scope of that project. They said, too big. No one's going to want to buy this after they realize what it's going to cost to make a 5 disc game and sell a 5 disc game. And so as a result, that game was quietly canceled realistically before it even made it past the planning stage. I mean, they literally just kind of said, "Hey, this is our idea. It's going to be 5 discs. It's going to be this kind of game." They started taking pre-orders, and then before they got anywhere beyond that, management said, nope." And so the money was refunded. A letter was sent out like, "Hey, we're not doing this anymore. Might we suggest uh, a different kind of game? Our Final Fantasy games, we've been told, are pretty great." That's literally what the letter says. So play them instead. But the idea of a new kind of action RPG, one that combined fast-paced swordplay with a narrative depth, like the narrative depth that Square was known for, that idea kind of lingered, right? And so it was around this time that Koichi Ishii, who had served as the character designer on the first 3 Final Fantasy games, was given the chance basically to direct a new project. And drawing from his deep interest in fantasy and world building, Ishii wasn't just interested in making another game, he wanted to craft an entirely new world. It was going to be a living, a breathing place that just happened to be explored through video games. And that perspective shaped everything about his creative process. Rather than following game conventions or adhering to the strict narrative formulas that games were known for the time, he kind of pulled from the type of abstract imagery that we all kind of have rooted in our childhood memories, right? They He pulled from books, from films that he and a lot of us would have enjoyed as a child. Works like The Moomins by Tove Jansson, Alice's Adventures in Wonderlands by Lewis Carroll, and even Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. These stories, in his mind, legitimately, they're not just about fantasy. They were about places. They are worlds filled with strange creatures and curious rules. They create a sense of wonder that stays with a lot of people, including Ishii, into our adulthood, to be fair.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Ishii wanted to evoke that same sense of discovery and emotional resonance that those games provide in his own games. Now, the first game in Ishii's world, what would become the Mana series, was originally conceived under the title Gemma Knights. It's a reference to the ancient order of warriors sworn to protect the sacred mana tree. And this is an idea that he would carry throughout the entire larger mana mythos. And as the concept of Gemma Knights evolved, Square decided that they would rebrand it by pulling out that old trademark Seiken Densetsu, right? The legend of the sacred sword. And that gave the game a more mystical, timeless identity. It would be one that was more closely aligned with Ishii's vision of a world shaped by natural forces and spiritual balance. So we have Seiken Densetsu in the East, in Japan, but when it came time to release the first game in the series in the West, Square wanted to leverage their immensely popular franchise to increase visibility. So Seiken Densetsu was brought over to the United States as Final Fantasy Adventure, even though it had literally no direct connection to the core Final Fantasy universe. This is a Game Boy title that was more of a spiritual cousin than a sequel, but the branding worked, frankly, and it helped the game reach a wider audience outside of Japan. Final Fantasy Adventure was a quiet success. It wasn't as explosive as Final Fantasy IV, which was making waves on the Super Famicom around the same time, but what it proved to Square, to the management, was that there was room in Square's catalog for something different than a Final Fantasy title, so to speak. And so, with the success of Final Fantasy Adventure and the promise of new hardware on the horizon, which was going to be the Super SNES CD-ROM, Square began development on Seiken Densetsu 2, which would eventually become Secret of Mana. Right from the get-go, that game, our topic today, was designed specifically for the Super Famicom CD-ROM add-on. And if you don't know what that is, we've kind of covered it before in our Sony PlayStation episode. It was a joint venture between Nintendo and Sony that pretty much promised a major leap in storage capacity and multimedia capacity, because CD-ROMs were are still to this day leaps above. No, I can't say to this day, can I? Leaps above cartridges. Cartridges nowadays are leaps above CD-ROMs, right? Because CD-ROMs have a limited capacity, and we're in the like terabytes for miniature storage now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that. I don't know that there's any disk drive, Blu-ray, or anything that can
Yeah,
touch that anymore.
for sure. So from the
But in the
get go,
past, yeah, you're right.
in the past. So like I said, from the get go, this game was they had planned on making this game for that joint venture for the Famicom CD-ROM add-on, and the CD-ROM format, more so than the capacities that they were used to, was going to allow for lush animated scenes, CD quality music, voice dialogue, and in their mind, a massive branching world of that was full of complex interactions and side quests. The narrative structure that they wrote out was ambitious. It was intended to be richer and more cinematic than anything Square had done before. So they had big aspirations going in this process, you know?
Right.
And then it all came crashing down.
What? No way. Come on. Another one?
Another one. In 91, Nintendo and Sony had a falling out. Nintendo abruptly terminated its partnership with Sony and abandoned the SNES CD-ROM altogether. In case you don't know, that split famously led to the creation of the PlayStation. Sony abandoned the CD-ROM project, but they didn't abandon it, they repurposed it, right? It became the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
In the short term, that left developers like Square in a difficult position, right? Because now there was no CD add-on to develop for, which meant that they had to par the scope of the game way down, because now Seiken Densetsu 2 was going to have to be a standard Super Famicom or SNES cartridge. And that single change, its impact on the development of the game was immediate and brutal. You had to rework the game from the ground up to, I mean, CD-ROMs at the time were what, 400 megs, 500 megs. I think they got up to 7 is the big. We've covered that at one time. I don't think they were at that point. So let's say hundreds of megs at the time, right? And they had to rework the whole game to fit onto a 16 megabit cartridge. That's less than 1/8 of the storage space that they originally planned on having.
Yeah, that hurts. As someone who constantly fights with having enough space on their hard drives,
That's right.
that hurts.
And so dozens of features had to be cut. Full voice acting was out the window, multiple story branches out the window, at least 3 major areas that the team had already designed, no way to fit them out the window. Developers have since confirmed that there were entire dialogue scenes, entire character arcs, and complete gameplay systems that had to be scrapped or trimmed down beyond recognition due to the space limitations. One of the most significant changes was the removal of the option to take multiple routes through the game that would lead to several possible endings. In contrast, the final version of the game is very much a linear journey. But those limitations didn't stop with story content. The English localization now had to be done under tighter memory and time constraints that led to awkward phrasing, truncated conversations, and the occasional mistranslation. The team was even forced to remove their multiplayer mode temporarily just to get the rest of the game working. They eventually were able to hastily reintegrate it near the end of development. And this became one of Secret of Mana's defining features, to be fair. Its ability to let up to 3 players control each member of the party simultaneously, which is something that was virtually unheard of in console RPGs at the time. Now, the SNES has 2 plugs on it, so the third player required a SNES peripheral called the multi-tap. But with the multi-tap, you had drop-in, drop-out co-op gameplay that helped set this game apart from anything else on the market. And so when it finally came out on August 6th, 1993, well, I mean, to be honest with you, people were clamoring to play it.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out more.
Yes, we will. Rob, playing Secret of Mana really made me appreciate how powerful teamwork can be.
Yeah, especially when you're not stuck controlling that one party member who just spams analyze over and over again.
Hey, sometimes you need a strategy. But seriously, whether you're casting spells, swinging swords, or making a podcast, the best adventures are the ones you don't take alone.
Well, I think I might like where this is going.
Absolutely. And that's why, Rob, we use Zencaster, the all in one podcasting platform that makes it super easy to collaborate no matter where your co hosts are. Whether you're side by side on the couch or recording from opposite ends of the world, Zencaster gives you studio quality audio and video straight from your browser.
So no need for any enchanted gear or crystal orbs?
Nope. Just log in, hit record, and let the magic happen. Zencaster also helps you with post production, automatically cleaning up audio, removing filler words, and balancing your audio levels. It's like having your own wise elder guiding your podcast to greatness.
And once we're done recording, how do we get our show out into the world?
Well, Zencaster handles that too. You can distribute to all major platforms, track analytics, and grow your audience all in one place. It's the ultimate co op tool for content creators.
All right, I'm convinced. Where do we sign up?
That's easy. Head over to zencaster.com/pricing and use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane. You'll get 30% off the first month of any Zencaster paid plan. Whether you're just getting started or looking to level up your production, Zencaster has you covered.
Sounds like a critical hit to me. That's zencaster.com/pricing, code memory card lane. Record your own legend, one episode at a time.
All right, let's get back to the secret of mana. We've still got seeds to seal and empires to topple.
So, Dave, what was Secrets of Mana like?
Rob, if there's one thing that set Secret of Mana apart from other RPGs of the era, it was how different it felt to play. While most RPGs of the early 90s were still rooted in turn based combat, Secret of Mana brought that action out into the open with real time battles, animated sword swings, and I guess a rhythm to combat that kind of made every hit count. Most RPGs at the time were like Final Fantasy, where players kind of had to dive through menus, pause. A lot of games were turn based, right? So, turn based, you have to kind of dig through menus. Oh, first you hit magic, and then you got to hit your spell, and you kind of had to dig all through these like nested menus to do your battling. But Secret of Mana wasn't real time; it was action, real time. It wasn't turn based; it was real time rather. And so, along with that, came this really unique UI, which was the ring menu system. So instead of pausing the game and blocking the screen with clunky interface boxes, as part of every character, you could just bring up a circular menu that had all their like items, weapons, and magic. And so with the ring menu, you could like cycle through commands in a snap even mid battle. So you were not really ever breaking the flow of action.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of thing that we're just so used to nowadays with the advent of everything. I mean, everything is real time nowadays, and multiplayer is so prominent that menus are always going to be real time in a multiplayer game. But at the time, it was incredibly intuitive, and there wasn't anything like it at the time. This is one of the earlier real time combat games, frankly, in the RPG genre.
You say that it's so commonplace. I guess I don't play enough RPGs to feel like it is. So,
I mean, the whole Final Fantasy series isn't turn based anymore.
yeah, I haven't played since 7.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah, we're not turn based at all anymore. We haven't been turn based for since 12, 13, somewhere in there.
Oh
10
well.
was 11 was online
Oh, you know
MMORPG.
what? Was 10 like the X?
Yes.
Okay, so I did play that, but that was still turn based.
Yeah. Yeah, but then
So I've never played a Final Fantasy that wasn't. That's funny.
let's see. When did Final Fantasy move? That says Y. What was the first Final Fantasy with real time combat? 11. Yeah, so I just nailed it on the head because that was a real
That's funny.
time. That was an MMORPG. So that's kind of when it started. So, um,
Hmm.
yep. And then
Well, there you go.
that just kind of kept going. All right. So yeah, but at the time, real time was not. It was there wasn't anything like it. So combat in the game wasn't just about attacking. You leveled up, you mastered your weapon classes, so all of the weapon types you could pick up in the game, like swords and spears, axes, whips. There was other types. They all could be upgraded using orbs that you found throughout the world. And kind of as you powered them up, there were new charge attacks that were available. So you would hold down the button, and the longer you hold it down, there were stronger, flashier moves, so to speak. But I will tell you that the draw, definitely the multiplayer. This was, like I said before, drop in, drop out, couch co-op at its best. So with the help of a multi-tap, you could have your friends. It was always a party of three. There was the main character, a mysterious girl, and a sprite creature. And so the player two would be the girl, and player three would be the sprite creature. With when you had other players, you could all work together in combat. Obviously, you could solve puzzles. and you could cast spells in sync. There was a lot of strategy to it when you had three people playing at once. The AI at this time was really rudimentary. To be fair, it's 93. You know what I mean? So when you didn't have other people playing and you were letting the computer play the other two characters, it wasn't as fluid as an experience. It didn't make it bad, but it wasn't as fluid as an experience. But
I mean, I completely get that. How often is it going to be?
yeah,
I mean, even I guess even nowadays, computers have gone far, but never quite as cohesive as with your friends there.
yeah.
Unless your friends suck.
What this game did was it turned the classic JRPG formula into a like shared experience among friends. It legitimately felt like Legend of Zelda played with a group of friends because it's that same top-down overworld style, you know.
I
And
mean,
like
that's pretty cool concept when you think about it.
I had brought up before, we talked about this early on in our podcast history. It's one of our first few episodes where we weren't talking so much about the history, but this came up while we were talking about video games as art. This was one of my examples of video games as art. I think I even found a playthrough, a guy who did a really great playthrough of it on YouTube, and that's in the show notes and everything. I remember that because I had reached out to him. I liked his whatchamacallit a lot. Its story, for me personally, was one of the more emotional narratives during the 16-bit era. This game opens up with a classic hero's journey, literally. There is a nameless boy who we know now as Randy. He stumbles upon a rusty sword embedded in a stone near a waterfall. Classic sword in a stone story, right?
Mm.
And he pulls it free, not knowing that no one else can pull it free for starters. It's not supposed to be pulled free. When he pulls it free, strange monsters begin to appear, and the villagers see that the local villagers see that he has the sword, and they exile him because they believe that he has now disturbed the balance of nature. And from that moment forward, that boy is bound to that sword, the mana sword, which is a sacred relic that chooses its wielder. And then he is tasked with restoring the fading power of mana before the world falls into ruin. And like I said, he's joined by a few companions. They head off across the world, battling monsters, and along the way, they uncover a vast conspiracy led by an evil empire. And that setup feels really familiar, right? It's a chosen hero, it's an evil empire. The evil empire is using an ancient weapon, and the mana sword itself is an ancient weapon. So it's a very traditional fantasy story. But what Secret of Mana does that other RPGs didn't do a whole lot of was it told its story with a lot of subtlety and a whole lot of sadness, to be fair. It wasn't quite your I've got the sword, no kill everything, now go kill everything story. Very That's a very traditional RPG. That's not what this game was in any way, shape, or form. It was not about stopping the bad guys. It was all about healing a broken world, fixing a landscape that was full of ruins and drained forests, poisoned waterways, uh, and corrupted temples. Basically, coming to understand in the course of the story that there are sacrifices that one must make in order to save the world in this case. And when he comes to term, a lot of the story is coming to terms with said sacrifices. So when Secret of Mana released in Japan on August 6th, 93, and then in North America on October 3rd of 93, it honestly made an immediate impression. Critics praised its colorful graphics. They loved that ring menu system because it was so different. Its soundtrack, I talked about that in much more time. Its soundtrack is amazing. It's one of the best 8-bit soundtracks. It's right up there with your Chrono Triggers and Final Fantasies of the era. I mean, it's Square. That should be no surprise, you know.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, critics didn't like the game's rush English localization, which was constrained by the cartridge space, as we said, kind of had all these issues with the awkward phrasing and the mistranslations. And again, AI wasn't that great. So if you were playing with AI controlled party members, they struggled with like pathfinding, and then there were just some bugs that just kind of broke the immersion for some people. I was never that picky. Despite all these issues, though, players embraced the game's heart. They loved its creativity. They loved its ambition, even though it wasn't as big as it originally was. Its sense of scope and ambition definitely still stands true. Commercially, Secret of Mana was a success. It ended up selling 1.83 million copies worldwide.
God damn.
1.5 million of those came from Japan.
Oh, so
So,
super not popular outside of Japan, but
to be fair, that makes it one of the best selling games on the Super Famicom, Japan's SNES.
yeah.
It's definitely one of Square's top performing games in the pre Final Fantasy VII era, for sure.
Okay, fair.
And admittedly, yes, while its Western sales were definitely more modest, it still performed well enough to solidify Square's confidence in the Mana series as a brand, and realistically gave them the confidence to continue making action RPGs for the global market, right?
Okay, fair. That's all fair.
That's all that mattered, right? You
Yeah,
make some
yeah.
money enough to make them want to make other money. So,
Yeah, no, I get it. I get you. I get you.
and to be fair, Secret of Mana is it's a fixture on most of your like best of the SNES lists. It is one of the most influential action RPGs of all time. It's really hard to deny that it's not. That ring menu system, um, the way it handled emotion, its soundtrack, like you can see, and the concept of the action RPG to begin with, like you can see its influence in so many games. Secret of Evermore, which is another favorite of mine from that time period. The series continued with like Trials of Mana. It's definitely no doubt into there. And then there are Western series like Champions of Norath. I mean, Baldur's Gate, the Dark Alliance series. Um, the Dark Alliance series is Baldur Gate's version of an action RPG. Definitely some influence there. And Diablo. I mean, Diablo is one of now the latest and greatest action RPGs of all time. Where did they get action RPG come from? Someone did it. You know what I mean?
Not before the first.
Not before the first. And like I said, that ring menu system was the first of so many countless UI designs, similar UI designs that have been used in RPGs and other games since. I mean,
Kind of
let's
like the GTA weapon wheel.
weapon. That's exactly what it was. It's a weapon wheel.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the wheel in Mass Effect for whatever reason, but I mean, let's be honest. Wheels as a UI design are in everything nowadays, right? Like that is such a freaking common design choice for a user interface. It's not even funny.
If you say so.
I do.
Okay. I don't know,
So
man.
Final Fantasy Adventure or Seiken Densetsu became Secret of Mana or Seiken Densetsu 2. And Secret of Mana was far from the end of the story. The Mana series would continue to evolve, sometimes in surprising directions. They did make a direct sequel, Seiken Densetsu 3, which was released for the Super Famicom in 95, and that pushed the Mana series even further. They had 6 playable characters. They were able to work on branching storylines, and it it had a day and night system that like influenced the gameplay, which was pretty cool.
Oh wow.
But Seiken Densetsu 3 was never localized outside of Japan during the SNES era. So, you know, games that aren't mainstream that end up being localized by fan translations never end up as popular because it's a very niche group of people that are willing to rely on fan translations to play games from overseas, at least in the 90s and 2000s. I think the internet drastically changed that, but we didn't have the internet in 95 the same way we do now, you know.
Yeah, that's very fair. It is a lot different now, but so you gotta do what you gotta do if you want to play a game. Maybe learn the language. Then you ain't got to worry about a translation.
That just I brought up Trials of Mana already. Trials of Mana is Seiken Densetsu 3. It didn't come here until 2019 as Trials of Mana, and Trials of Mana is actually part of what's called the Collection of Mana that's on the Nintendo Switch. They brought the whole kit and caboodle to the Switch on in 2019, and then Trials of Mana got a full 3D remake in 2020 that was honestly well received because they modernized its combat, but they stayed faithful through its tone.
Oh, nice.
Aside from that, the Mana series really struggled to find consistent footing. We had Legend of Mana that was released for the PlayStation in 1999, and
Oh, that one I remember.
Legend of Mana kind of gave us hand painted visuals, right?
Yep, I remember that one. I think I still have that disc somewhere.
Non linear storytelling, and there was this land make system. Players could kind of build the world map themselves, and uh, it was controversial because the way it was designed. And to be fair, this is how it rated too. It really divided critics, it divided fans because it was a beautiful game, it was a charming game, but that the way you could build the world map for yourself really kind of broke up the narrative, so the narrative felt disjointed, right? And the progression was very vague because they tried so hard to let players do it themselves. Like there's an art to that. There's an art to that that open world games have mastered in a way that we didn't have in 1999, you know?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But they tried. It was called the land make system, and it really fell on deaf ears for the most part. So, the Legend of Mana, Rob, if you do want to play it, they remastered it in 2021. So it's received a little differently now. Now people kind of look at it as a quirky experimental game in the series. But you do have a chance to play it now remastered. The series kind of hit a low in the next period. Sword of Mana in 2003, which was a Game Boy Advance remake of the first game, Final Fantasy Adventure. It updated the story, updated the visuals to Game Boy Advance era, but that kind of in the process it lost some of its original pacing and definitely wasn't as challenging, which people didn't like. And then the DS ones, which I own, Children of Mana and Heroes of Mana, they tried to reimagine the series with dungeon crawling and real time strategy elements, but neither really captured that old school action RPG feel that the Essence fans loved. Um, I got them because you could link up DS to DS and play with other people, which was fun. I know Adam and I, if I'm not mistaken, played Children of Mana together. So
Yeah, it's a pretty cool feature when you're able to do that.
by the
Was it
late
like remote play or like same location kind of link?
Link, it was Link.
Okay.
Yeah. By the late 2000s, the Mana series had faded into obscurity, with Square Enix then made a decision to shelve that IP for years. But like I said, with these remasters, 99, I'm sorry, 2019 with the collection, 2021 with the Legend of Mana, there's kind of been a modern Mana renaissance, so to speak, right? That increasingly more, let's say increasingly, no, an increasing interest in retro RPGs in the modern era have helped reintroduce the series to new players, right? Um,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
because people are remaking old school RPGs from that period all over the place, and it's the older generations, my generation, and so to speak, that is like we get excited over the nostalgia of these games, and that excitement brings up the hype and introduces these games to newer generations, and then they get to enjoy the cycle, and hopefully it repeats itself. Realistically, that's how that's how it works.
True. No, that is. I dig it.
Koichi Ishii's original vision, a world that could be explored across different games, told through different lenses. It definitely still resonates, even if the franchise has taken some detours along the way. Through all its ups and downs, however, I think it's fair to say that Secret of Mana is the cornerstone. It's the height of the vision. It's the vision fully realized. It's the game that mostly realizes Ishii's dream of a mystical, emotionally driven world. And while the rest of the series has had its peaks and its valleys, there is a sense of wonder and magic, I think, that will always draw players back to Secret of Mana, to the Tree of Mana, time and time again. So there you go.
There
Now,
you go.
we once talked about the history, or we once talked about art, this game as an artistic video game, and now we know its history. We've come full circle. We can pack it up and never do this ever again.
Wow. Tell us how you really feel, Dave.
And that's the end of our podcast. No, I'm just kidding. So, like we said, we have old episodes. Fair warning, if you go back that far, you're going to find a very different podcast. We were topical back then. We wrote the script, read the script. It didn't feel as good, wasn't as fluid. We were still trying to figure ourselves out. So those early episodes, very, very different than the way we are now, but they exist. And just like these games are a part of video game history, those podcasts are part of our history. And we do encourage you to check out our history. Why not? It's there. It's ripe for the picking. In order to do so, you can go back and check out our archives on our website, which is www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people do on our website?
You can find a calendar of our future episode topics, find out what we're going to be talking about, whether it's a game or a console or it's just something in general, like maybe a museum, which you'll know more if you go check out our archives. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come chat with Dave and I about gaming related topics or episode topics or, just some cool stuff you'll never know unless you join. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us and get access to ad free and unedited versions of all of our episodes. And you can find links to our social media where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Each week, we'll tell you one story relevant to the current week in gaming history. As Rob said, it can be about a game, technology, it can be about a museum. We did it on a circus a few weeks ago. We find weird and interesting stuff about video game history, and we talk about it. That's simple. While doing so, we hope to teach you something new about each topic, what they take from the world as their inspiration, or what they give back to the world in their legacy. We love this because when we sit down every week to do research and outline our episodes, we find out new things. We learn new things about each topic. And I get excited because when I learn something, I go, ooh, there's something new. I get to teach someone something. So it's this fantastic cycle of teaching and learning, learning and teaching. And in celebration of said cycle, we like to go round table and talk about our takeaways every week. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, I think my big takeaway is that this was originally slated for the CD attachment, and it ended up having to get knocked down to an eighth of its original size. Because if it was as popular as it was, given that, who knows how it could have done globally if it was everything it was promised to be. It obviously did very well in Japan, and that's fantastic. But it, who knows if it could have done even more well in the West if the partnership hadn't fallen through. It's always that big what if, kind of a cool thing to think about.
Very, very true. What if indeed?
So that's for me. What about for you? What's your big takeaway?
I I don't think I ever realized that Final Fantasy Adventure was the beginning of the Seiken Densetsu series. I think for the longest time Secret of Mana was the beginning for me, but it is not in fact the beginning. So that's probably my biggest thing that got cemented into my brain doing this research. So there you go.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I mean, Secrets was my first, or Legends, the PlayStation one.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, that was
Uh
my first.
yeah, Legends.
That was the PlayStation one, right? Legends.
Yeah, Legend of Mana. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's what I always thought was the original. Just I never knew before that.
Yeah, Secret's fantastic. All right, well, I guess on that note, Rob, before I wrap it up and take it into next week, is there anything you'd like to add to today's episode?
Just take one quick moment to say thank you so much to everyone for listening. It means the world to us, and we hope you continue to listen and learn.
Yeah, we do. We sure do. As we sheathe our swords and watch the mana tree sway in the breeze, we're left with a game that was more than just a technical marvel. It was a heartfelt journey. Secret of Mana kind of stands at the crossroads of innovation and compromise. Born, as Rob said, from the ruins of a scrapped SNES CD-ROM project, it managed to defy its limitations and deliver one of the most unique and beloved RPGs of its time. From its real time combat to its revolutionary ring menu system, its cooperative multiplayer, its emotionally resonant story, Secret of Mana, it invited players not just to play, but to feel. It gave us a world that was lush, mysterious, and alive. And through all its triumphs and technical hiccups, it still reminds us that video games can be art, storytelling, and a shared experience all in one. So whether you played it alone or you go play it with friends, whether you remember the haunting music or the first time you sealed in a mana seed, Secret of Mana lives on in the hearts of players around the world. And that, more than anything, is the mark of a true classic. Next week, we're sheathing our swords from the Secret of Mana and unfolding the whimsical world of Paper Mario. Released in 2001 for the Nintendo 64, this charming RPG turned the Mushroom Kingdom into a papercraft masterpiece, blending turn based combat with vibrant storytelling and playful humor. From its inventive mechanics to its unforgettable characters, Paper Mario wasn't just a game, it was a storybook come to life. So join us as we dive into its history, design, and legacy on next week's colorful trip down memory card lane. To the thing.